20 years ago yesterday, the U.S. witnessed the most tragic terrorist attack ever to take place on American soil. Today, on For the Republic, we remember.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Ask not what your country can do for you.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Thank you for watching this week's episode of For the Republic. We're happy to have you here. Don't forget to hit like and share this episode with all of your friends. And if this is your first time here, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on your notifications so you remember every Sunday night at 7 p.m. when a new episode premieres.
September 11th, 2001, marked a dreadful day where 4 planes were hijacked by 19 hijackers, resulting in 2 planes crashing into the World Trade Center, 1 plane crashing into the Pentagon, and 1 plane crashing into a field outside of Camp David in Pennsylvania. This resulted in over 3,000 lives lost. Among them were hardworking Americans, first responders, law enforcement, and more. Let's talk about where we were on that day.
So me personally, I was homeschooled, so I was actually at home with my mom. She was getting ready for work, and my dad called and told her to turn on the TV because there had been an attack in New York City. So we threw on the television. We saw the news playing what had happened. And I remember not really understanding the full weight of what was going on. And my mom saying, Brittany, this is a really serious thing that's happened. And I could tell she was scared and she was upset and crying. And she had to finish getting ready for work. So we had like an old small box TV, like one of those 10-inchers or whatever that, everybody had when they were younger. And we took that with us to her work and we put it up in the break room. And we just spent all day, like as much time as we possibly could, watching to see what was happening and the developing news. And you could just tell as the day went on, as more and more people came in that had seen what had happened, people were just like very somber. They were scared. We just didn't know what happened or the full weight of what happened. And even if it was over. So,
Yeah, right.
Where were you?
So I was actually at school, and I didn't know anything about it until I got home from school.
Oh, so your school didn't tell you?
No, my school did not say anything about it. The first thing I remember about that day was, and I remember so vividly, and it's crazy when you reminisce or things that get implanted in your brain, you remember certain details. And I just remember early in the morning when we first got to school, my principal, and I don't even remember what he looked like. I just knew he was the principal. He pulled out my teacher from the classroom, and they spoke out in the hall what seemed to be the longest 5 minutes of my life. It was just, everybody was wondering what was going on, and we were just all talking amongst ourselves, and then that's when the atmosphere just completely changed. Kids, if they're left alone, they tend to, just talk about random stuff and laugh and get loud and things. And then it just went from that to complete silence because my teacher came back into the classroom and she was bawling her eyes out. And she had her face covering, and she covered her face with her hands, and she was just crying uncontrollably. And it seemed like the decibels in the room like just flipped, and it was like went from like 110 to 0 just listening to her crying. It was such a somber moment, and I can only speak for myself what I was feeling at the time. I thought maybe something had happened to her, like maybe she had something happen to her family or a friend or something, and and that was the only thing I remember about that day at school. And then my next memory of that day was not until I got home. And my dad pointed to the TV, and he was watching the news from the second he woke up to me getting home. He was just on the couch all day, just eyes taped to the TV. And he pointed toward the TV, and he said, "Did you see what happened?" And it was like a movie picture moment where I looked at the TV, and I just watched the second plane hit the second tower, and my jaw just dropped. And at 7 years old, I don't know what I was thinking at that time. I don't know if it was something that my parents told me or if it was just something I knew, but I associate that picture of me looking at the plane hitting the second tower I associate that with an act of terror, of evil. And like I said, I don't know if it was something that I just knew by looking at it or if it was explained to me, but I knew pretty early on that there was a terrorist attack and the Americans were attacked by a foreign entity. And I remember being angry. I remember being upset. I remember, sharing all the emotions that millions of Americans shared with each other across the country. And it's just something I will never forget. I mean, everybody has their own story of where they were and what happened to them, and this time was just such a time where our country became unified. What was some of the aftermath for you, your experiences?
Well, actually, the aftermath is when it really became serious for me because I kind of watching it happen, I didn't understand the significance really of what was going on. Even at 12, I feel like maybe you had like a little more sensitivity to the situation. But it was the aftermath. It was them showing our first responders pulling people out of the rubble. It was realizing that we lost hundreds of firefighters, that people's families were missing. There were, posters all over New York City, and they would show it on the news all the time of the people that were missing, people looking for their loved ones. And that's really when it hit home for me. And a couple of things hit home. It made me realize how serious the situation was and what a big deal it was and how things were probably never going to be the same again in our country. But it also made me realize what a strong people we have, that so many people came together and so many people risked their lives to pull people out of the rubble, to even go in the towers before they crumbled, to saving people's lives, to helping people. And still, we still have first responders who are losing their lives because of the aftermath of what happened, the toxins and the dust that they inhaled at the World Trade Centers. The military members that we lost at the Pentagon, the people even that we lost in the plane that went down in Pennsylvania that so heroically took back their plane and crashed their plane before it could get to the White House. That the aftermath of everything, that's when it became serious for me. And something kind of like woke up in me, this love of our country and this patriotism for our country. And I just remember in the coming days, it was like I wanted to do everything that I could at 12 to help or to make a difference, fundraising and doing things to send Bibles into New York City for our first responders. And so our missionaries could go in and be there to pray with people, and that was something that I personally did because I felt such a love for the people who had been lost and such a love for the people who were still there, who were working and who were volunteering and who were serving. So,
and for me, the immediate aftermath, I remember the very next day at school is when we were just in front of the TV all day. We didn't do any schoolwork. We didn't do anything for class. We just sat there and watched the news. And to me, that'll always be a special moment. And I'm so thankful that our school did that because it really solidified the weight of what was going on for us as young kids. And it was something that we all were unified together. It was people didn't have to go through it alone. We were just together as classmates, teachers, and it really felt like, the country was actually came together. Like, it didn't matter what our political differences were. It didn't matter what our religious differences were. It didn't matter anything. Like, we were just, if you were an American, you were part of it. And, our heart broke for everybody that was lost and everybody that passed. And I'm same thing with you, first responders, like that. To me, thinking about the firefighters and the law enforcement, especially, that literally risked their lives to save people. As the rubble was coming down, they pushed people out of the way and they took the rubble themselves. I mean, like, thinking about that picture is just, painting that in my mind just breaks my heart every time. And it's that spirit, it's that tenacity that lives on, even though they've passed. And I'm so thankful for our first responders. I'm so thankful for our law enforcement and
our military members.
Our military that, afterwards, in the response, that were so willing to go out and risk their lives. The amount of increase that our military saw just after that happened. People that never even thought of joining the military,
right?
Decided to enlist so that they could they could be a part of what comes next after. So,
And I think it's important to point out that like these people don't do this because it's their jobs. They do it because they love their communities. They love the people around them. They love serving. They love being there. And like, yes, it is their job, but they do it out of a love for the country that we live in. And I think that that's so important to remember. And it's something to be proud of. Like as everyday Americans, it's something to be proud of that we have such a unique country that people come together and help those in need and help those who are hurting and help those who have gone through a tragedy. And we, I mean, me personally, there's nothing that you could ever say to me that would make me feel any differently about our first responders, about our police,
Absolutely.
about our military, because to me, they are a step above. I absolutely have all respect for them, and I am so thankful for what they did 20 years ago, and I'm so thankful for what they're still doing now, what they do every single day. And I think that really that American spirit has carried on. You could see that when we lost 13 Americans in Afghanistan recently. We saw where people began GoFundMe's, and within 24 or 48 hours, there was $100,000 raised for one of the families because his wife was pregnant and expecting. And so they raised $100,000 within 48 hours so that she would have money to educate their child and to raise their child. And it's just like, to me, it's as much rhetoric as we hear out there that's anti-military, anti-police, really patriotism. At the same time, there's so many people out there who recognize what a beautiful place we live in and how important these people are in our lives. And so all respect to them and all thankfulness to them, during that time.
You mentioned the suicide bombing in Kabul that happened recently, and our hearts go out to the families. But I think it's really important, and it shows the spirit of our American military that 12 out of the 13 who passed weren't even old enough to remember 9/11. So they were willing to die for something that they weren't even around to witness or be a part of. And it's the forefathers that came before them that left that same mentality and that same pride and that same willingness to fight that they carried on. And I see them as an extension. I don't see them as a separate generation that was outside of 9/11. You know what I mean?
Right.
They're an extension of what we remember, and they made the ultimate sacrifice so that we could still remember for them and talk about it and live a free nation. And like you said, like there is literally nothing that you can do or say to me that would change my mind about our first responders and our law enforcement and our military.
Absolutely.
So
do we have an update of what's going on in Afghanistan? Are there still Americans that are stranded there?
So it's the situation in Afghanistan right now has not been clear. In my opinion, doing research, the last that I know of a few days ago, there was 6 planes that were being held in Kabul airport that were not allowed to leave, and that those 6 planes contained at least 200 Americans and hundreds more of Afghan nationals that had visas and passports and stuff to leave the country. And from what I understand, the Taliban would not let them leave. And these 6 planes were part of the Nazarene Fund that was Glenn Beck's fundraiser to get people out, and they actually raised over $30 million to make that happen. And so they rented out planes from Cam Air, which is an airliner in Afghanistan, and their objective was to get out as many people as they could because we left behind so many.
Right.
So in their attempts to get people out, the Taliban wouldn't let them leave. I don't know if they were holding them for ransom or holding them for just because. All of this stuff is unclear because our government literally did not help them at all.
Well, it's interesting to note that because just on Wednesday, Peter Doocy was grilling Jen Psaki during her little conference, and he asked her about why the Biden administration was referring to the Taliban as professional and businesslike. And she had she knew the question was coming from someone. She probably knew it was coming from Peter Doocy because he really tends to ask her like the hard questions. But she had a very rehearsed, they've cooperated with us and they've done what we've asked them to do and on, just this very rehearsed response. And Peter Doocy pulled out a wanted poster from his paperwork, and he said, this is the leader of the Taliban and he is a wanted individual for his crimes. How, again, can the Biden administration call him professional and businesslike? And she just kind of glazed over it and moved right on to the next question. And that's just crazy to me, because here we had Americans, allies, and green card holders in the airport. My understanding was up to 1,000 that they had with 6 planes on the ground just waiting to leave, and the Taliban was refusing to let them leave, and the State Department wasn't coming through with the ability to send them off.
Yeah,
so,
it really just shows that they have no leverage over the Taliban.
Right.
They're at the mercy of the Taliban, and the Taliban know that. And if I was to connect the dots, what I would assume is that the Taliban purposely held these planes just to see how much they can get away with.
Oh, I'm sure.
So, and we're really showing our true colors here, that we have no leverage over the Taliban right now in Afghanistan.
Right.
So, from what I understand, I don't know if all 6 planes have left, but I know that at least a plane left with a few American citizens on it. And not sure if it was all of them that they were intending on getting out, or if it was just some of them. But I do know that a plane did land in Qatar outside of Saudi Arabia just a couple of days ago. I don't know if it was all 6 planes, so that remains to be seen. But again, it's unfortunate that we don't get any of this information firsthand. This should be something that should be on the news cycle every day.
Right. It seems like the Biden administration doesn't really know what's going on. I know when the suicide bombing happened, one of the things that President Biden had said just before that is, if you kill any Americans, we're going to take swift action. And the response was a drone attack. And it's coming out actually just within the last few hours. It's come out that drone attack actually didn't hit any terrorists. It actually killed a humanitarian aid worker, and it killed several civilian men and women, and several children. So the actual drone attack, which they've been claiming now for weeks, took care of who they were targeting, which clearly is not the case, because they only killed a humanitarian aid worker who was an ally, a U.S. ally, and several civilians and children. So it's just a lot of lies, really, a lot of misrepresentations, a lot of misconceptions coming out of the White House.
Up.
Right. It seems like Jen Psaki comes out every day with just kind of a list
seems like
of,
she's just got to pick up the pieces.
Right, a list of garbage to spew out and to try to pass over people's questions as quickly as possible. And so it really shows how jumbled the Biden administration is. And I think really on every subject that we've had to face in the last few months, because now there's just a massive unveiling of craziness coming out of the White House on COVID. Did you happen to watch the press conference with Biden?
So Biden on Thursday did a press conference, and he released his 6-point plan, and among which the biggest headline out of that is that every private organization or private employer that has over 100 employees has to either have their employees be vaccinated or weekly testing. And the weekly testing does not have to be provided by the employer, so they could actually leave it up to the employee to be forced to foot the bill for the weekly testing if they decide not to get vaccinated.
Which is hundreds of dollars, because I know where we are, our testing sites are about $70 a test.
Yeah.
So you're talking a weekly test at $70. People are going to be spending half or more of their paychecks each week on just getting tested so they can go to work, because they don't want to inject themselves with an untested and unvetted vaccine.
And from what we know, statistic-wise, that it seems, at least in the Northeast, predominantly it's minorities that aren't vaccinated right now. So whatever the case may be, we know that it's primarily targeting the minority demographic, and for a system that seems to be stacked against them already, so they say. I mean, it doesn't seem like they're doing them any favors at this point. I mean, they're forcing them to give up almost half of their paycheck to get tested if they decide that they don't want to be vaccinated. I mean, could you imagine somebody who literally can't get vaccinated and works for a company that has over 100 employees. I mean,
right, because there was no medical exception listed in that. And what's interesting is that it feels like this plan is going to target the minority communities, but only portions of the minority communities, because as we're seeing the illegal immigrants that are coming across the southern border from Mexico, they do not have to be vaccinated, and they don't have to be vaccinated for anything, for smallpox, for measles,
you come
for
into
anything.
this country illegally, and you don't pay any taxes, you don't have any legitimate papers, you're in here breaking the law, and you don't have to get vaccinated?
You do not have to get vaccinated. So they're releasing thousands of illegal immigrants every day into the United States that are unvaccinated, and they're allowed to just go and begin living here, and I'm sure working in places that they're not going to be counted as workers, because you can't report that to the IRS, right? So they're going to be working under the table, and there's going to be just thousands and thousands and thousands of people who don't have to be vaccinated, and they don't have to be vaccinated for anything, even the diseases and the issues that we have already eradicated, yet alone the COVID vaccine. So it's crazy to me that the Biden administration is targeting law-abiding, hardworking, mostly blue-collar citizens with this vaccination. But yet he's allowing illegal immigrants to cross the border without it. And it's funny, when questioned about that, their only response was, yes, that they can come here and be unvaccinated.
Yeah.
And you know, we're really seeing in our area particularly, we're seeing the aftermath of these forced and mandatory vaccinations even before this Biden plan comes into place. In fact, one of our local hospitals is no longer accepting maternity patients. They're not allowing deliveries on site because they have lost almost half of their staff, or it could be, by the time this is done, more than half of their staff, due to the nurses and the doctors refusing vaccinations, which speaks a lot to me about the safety of it.
Yeah. Yep. And this is just such a huge overreach, this mandate, and I don't foresee it getting enforced. So Biden's plan is to have OSHA enforce it. So he's using OSHA as a means to make the workplace, saying that the workplace is unsafe if you're not vaccinated. So OSHA is going to enforce vaccine mandates in order to, quote unquote, get the workplace up to snuff and be safe. So I don't foresee this actually going into effect. I really hope that this gets struck down by the Supreme Court. But it remains to be seen. I really I want to have faith in our checks and balances. I want to trust that the judicial branch will do its job. But that remains to be seen. This is something that's not uncommon for Biden to do. We saw it with the extensions for the renters, where he said that, what I'm doing is unconstitutional. You can't be evicted. So I'm just going to extend that. And I know that it has to go through the courts. So he's kind of doing the same thing, right?
Right. I think what he's hoping is that by putting this mandate into place, even if it eventually gets struck down, that the time it takes to get struck down, people are going to feel pressured, and they're going to feel like they have to get vaccinated. And it's going to encourage companies that have been kind of on the brink of, do we force vaccinations or do we not force vaccinations? They're just going to go ahead with it and go ahead and begin enforcing that. I actually know of a couple people already who have just quit their jobs in the last couple of days because they have gone into work, and their work has said that they are going to enforce this new Biden plan, and they've quit their jobs in the last couple of days because, like many Americans, there's a couple things that are going on, and that is that we believe that we should have the right to make our own healthcare decisions, and that is something the government shouldn't be able to take away from us. That is going to lead us into a more socialized form of medicine, more so than what the Obamacare system has already done, because the Obamacare system has really opened up the doors for socialized medicine, and it's hurt healthcare in such a significant way. So much so that a lot of people in my generation, I know, can't even afford health insurance through their jobs any longer. And that used to be kind of a staple. If you had a job that provided health insurance, a lot of the times you had it because it was affordable and you were able to get it. And now I know, of a lot of people who can't even afford the plans right through their own jobs.
Healthcare is just ridiculous. It's expensive.
And I think that the Biden administration is pushing that that even further, because if they can force you to get a COVID vaccination now, then what can they force later? They can they tell you that you're not healthy enough to receive treatment somewhere? Can they tell you that you're not qualified to go to the hospital? I've seen a lot of people even calling for hospitals to turn away the unvaccinated, which is crazy because in the United States, it's actually illegal to turn away anyone at a hospital. So even if you're uninsured or you don't have a way to pay or whatever, it doesn't matter. In America, you can receive health care.
Yeah, that was the biggest thing with the Obamacare, right? Is that he was preaching that health care is a right, and and nobody disagreed with that. Health care is a right in the United States, but the thing is that health insurance isn't a right. Health insurance is a privilege, but we do not deny health care in this country.
Right,
Everybody is entitled to walk into a hospital, whether you have health insurance or not, and be treated.
Absolutely. So even if you have no way to pay. So and I think that what we're going to see with this, I think that the push for this vaccination, and I think that this mandate is less of Joe Biden being concerned about American lives, because you saw from his behavior in Afghanistan that he's clearly not that concerned about American lives. But I think what we are seeing is a push to see how far can we go? How far can we push the American people before they start to push back?
So
how far can we invade their lives?
Do you think this is a slippery slope?
Absolutely. I think that what is today's mandatory vaccinations becomes tomorrow's. You have to submit your health concerns to the government, and they decide whether you can receive care. I think we'll end up with a similar system like Canada has, where their medicine is very socialized, and their government can decide if you qualify or don't qualify for treatment. They can decide if you're too terminal, or if you're too far along, or if you're not healthy enough to receive treatment. And I think that is something that we will see pushed here in America, should this Biden plan be allowed to continue, and should the Biden administration be able to continue to push further into our lives.
Yeah, this is a scary precedent that this would set if this was able to stick. And it's such a contradicting message, because if we're being told that these vaccines are so successful, and these vaccines prevent hospitalizations, they prevent deaths. So if these vaccines are so great, then why are Americans still hesitant on getting them?
Right. Well, I think that that's a lot to do with the Biden administration and the companies who put out these vaccines, their responses to what's been happening, because there's been a lot of misinformation, there's been a lot of misleading, and there's been a lot of outright lying. For instance, when Joe Biden first talked about the Delta variant, and he said, if you get vaccinated, you need to go get vaccinated to prevent yourself from getting the Delta variant. And then now it's been discovered through testing and studies that it's actually a lot less effective against the Delta variant. So you may have some reduced symptoms, but you probably will still have a very serious case of COVID if you get the Delta variant, even if you're vaccinated. But see, the message coming out of the White House in the beginning was protect yourself against this variant by getting the vaccinations. Then it was vaccinated people can unmask, vaccinated people have to remask, and vaccinated people are going to stay healthy and it doesn't matter. And now it's unvaccinated people are killing vaccinated people because they're not getting vaccinated. And it's just been such a great amount of misinformation. And even now, the NIH has just launched an investigation into the effects of the COVID vaccine and the female reproductive system.
Even though it's been fully FDA approved?
Right. So even though it's been fully FDA approved, if you remember back when the vaccines were first beginning to come out, there was quite a few doctors and scientists who came out and said that there are ingredients in the vaccinations that could prove to cause infertility in women of childbearing age. And very quickly that was kind of brushed off. Facebook took it down. It was considered misinformation. And it's funny, now we know that the White House is the one controlling that, because the White House has now, Jen Psaki has now said that they're in contact with Facebook about what is real news and what is fake news.
Isn't that crazy that they're in contact with private organizations that distribute social media, that they can just, they want them, they decide what they want?
Absolutely. So they're controlling the narrative, not only from the White House, but they're also controlling the narrative on social media. So a lot of women became concerned about, should I get the vaccine if I'm still wanting to have children? And they came out. They said, "Oh no, it's safe. It's safe. It's safe. This is tested. This is vetted," which it has not been fully tested. Even now that it's been FDA approved, it still has not gone through the full FDA testing trials. But the Pfizer vaccine has been FDA approved. Now they're looking into its effects on the female reproductive system because there are a lot of women coming out that have had serious or large changes in their menstrual cycles and their ability to menstruate and so on since they have received their dose of the vaccine. So now the NIH is actually launching an investigation in that to see if they can determine what the side effects are on women of childbearing age. Now that nearly 80% of the country has been vaccinated, and they've been telling women who are of childbearing age and even pregnant women that it's safe to receive.
Yeah. So to wrap all this up and to bring it full circle, what would have been a more effective approach, you think, if we were to take it all the way back to, let's say the vaccinations are now coming out, they're emergency FDA approved, and they are pretty much widespread throughout the world that you can get your first dose. What would you think the proper response would be going forward and to handle COVID?
Well, I think number one, transparency. I think a lot more people now would feel more comfortable getting the vaccinations if they had known from the beginning what the side effects were. If when they realized that strokes and heart conditions, that miscarriages, that actually dying from receiving the COVID vaccine doses, if they had realized that those were side effects from the very beginning, then I think it would make people feel more comfortable, because I think you would agree that being misled on something makes you less trustworthy of that thing. So now that we're seeing we're seeing more testing, we're seeing more studies coming out, more statistics, more numbers, percentages, and things like that. I think that there are a lot more people who would weigh the risk of the vaccination versus actually getting COVID, and they would probably decide to get vaccinated if they thought the information they were hearing now was correct. But because it has been so misleading up to this point, I think a lot of people just don't trust the data that's coming out.
Right.
They're scared that it's being misrepresented, and I think they're worried, really concerned, because even still the Biden administration has exempt Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson. They've exempt all of them from any liability should you have a side effect from the COVID vaccine. And I think that those things are concerning the vast amount of people who are still unvaccinated, and for good reason, because if there was nothing to hide, why is the administration trying to hide it? Why are the drug companies trying to hide it? And if it's such a safe vaccine, then why not just tell us the truth and let us make our own healthcare decision?
Right. Yep. I completely agree. I definitely don't think that shoving things down our throat is the way to convince the American people of anything. So this has been shoved down our throat that this is what the vaccine, and I think the biggest problem is that the Biden administration, they don't say it out loud, but it's clear that they want to try to eradicate COVID. They want to do anything they can to make sure that COVID is gone for good, which is a very unrealistic and quite frankly impossible precedent to set. So that's why it seems like it's so widely ridiculous, the things that are coming out of the White House and coming out of Fauci and all these doctors that you wouldn't have heard of otherwise, that are constantly in the media cycle. So that transparency would have made this whole process so much better.
Right. And
I think that we would have been better off if we were just given the facts and not the scare tactics that we get constantly in the media cycle. And I think that the American people are still smart enough to make their own healthcare decisions. I don't like it that people who aren't vaccinated, that they're being browbeaten all the time. I do not think that the unvaccinated is what's prolonging the pandemic. It's the Biden administration and the media that are prolonging the pandemic.
Absolutely. And I think too, the science coming out on either side has been very contradictory. So we do have a lot of people who are coming out, people who work in infectious diseases, scientists, doctors who are coming out, and they're saying that the variants that we're seeing pop up are not actually because of the unvaccinated, which has been really the message coming out of the White House lately. Yeah. In fact, Joe Biden's words were that he's losing his patience with the people who are unvaccinated, which is a pretty crazy thing for him to get so comfortable confrontational with the people who put him in office.
Yeah.
Most of them were already dead before the election, but the people who actually voted for him and put him in office, and he's losing patience with them. And to me, it's such a crazy message, because he's been saying the unvaccinated are killing the vaccinated now. That's been the message about the last, what do you say, like probably 2 weeks coming out of the White House.
The unvaccinated are killing the vaccinated, but the vaccine prevents you from dying, and you need the vaccine in order to survive. I just don't see how that makes sense.
Right. So their theory is that the unvaccinated are causing breakthrough cases with the vaccinated because they're spreading COVID around so easily. But what we're seeing coming out of a lot of different reports is that it's actually the vaccines, because the vaccines are not strong enough to really eradicate COVID-19. So it's kind of happening like the flu does, where the flu, there's thousands and thousands of strands of flu, and each year we'll have a breakout of a certain strain of flu. Well, kind of the same thing is happening with the COVID vaccine. People have gotten vaccinated, and it's not really enough to eradicate it, but it's enough that COVID can recognize the resistance and then try to evolve into something that can overpower that resistance. So
is the coronavirus going to end, the COVID vaccine going to end up being like an annual, like the flu vaccine?
I think so. I think that that's probably what it will eventually develop into in the years to come. I think that it'll be one of those get your annual COVID vaccine, and which is kind of funny that they call it a vaccine, because really vaccine used to mean that it was something that would eradicate the issue. Where now vaccine, they've kind of they've relabeled it, have they not?
Yes, they redefined vaccine. Vaccine used to be, before last week, a vaccine used to be that it would cause immunity. So it would be something that would help you, would prevent you from being able to get that said virus or bacteria in the future. Where now a vaccine is now something that is a step towards immunity.
Right.
So it is not the thing that causes immunity. It's a stepping stone.
Yeah.
So that the definition was actually changed. So you can see that these institutions in the left have redefined terms in order to fit their agenda. So they've changed the science in order to make it the science.
So what do you think going forward? What do you think if the administration suddenly decides that they actually care about the people that they represent and they want what's best for them? Not an agenda, not trying to take control, not trying to see how far they can invade in our lives before we rebel and we stand up. If there's no agenda and the White House really cares for the people, what do you think they have to do to make this a safe process and to make this a process that the American people trust?
So if that was up to me, I would address the American people this way. I would say, look, unfortunately, there is a virus that's in this world that we cannot stop. We cannot control. But what we can do is we can develop things that would help us prevent spread in the future, not permanently, but that we can continue using science to combat this, and it would be an ongoing battle. And we give these tools to you to use, whether you want to or not. If you want to protect yourself, we've laid out the pros and cons, and this is what it is. This is what we've developed so far. I think that the Biden administration has overreached in. Yes, the vaccines are a huge success story as far as how fast we got them, but they aren't finished yet. And I think that's a message that we need to relay to the American people, that this is not finished as far as the final vaccine.
Right.
It's always going to be constantly changing. So I would say it's up to you whether or not you want to take it now or if you want to weigh the risks. It's your health decision. But at the end of the day, the American people need to get back to their daily lives. And so that would be my message to the American people, is that, this is as good as it's going to get. Like, I mean, we have taken the death count from thousands upon thousands per day to less than 300 a day. I mean, that to me is a huge success story.
Right.
So, I mean, that I would be saying it seems like we're getting all of the negative, and I would be trying to relay the positive, because the positive is what's going to cause people to take action, right? If you uplift, not constantly put down. So I would have a positive message and in that way, and that COVID is beatable. But it's not going to be eradicated anytime soon.
Right. I think that you're right. They could take a similar approach that they have to like health heart disease, to cancer and things like that, where they
Yeah.
educate people on what you can do to prevent it. But they're not taking cigarettes off the shelves.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
not taking chemicals off the shelves that have things in them that have been shown to be linked to cancer. With heart disease, they're not going around and closing down the Five Guys and taking the 80-20 beef off the shelves.
Yeah.
But what they do is they educate people. They educate people through the school system. They educate people through the health department on what you can do to prevent those things, both of which, by the way, cancer and heart disease kill far more people a day than COVID does.
Yeah.
But if you take that approach and you spend more time educating people than trying to be a tyrant and forcing people to do something, I think you're right. I think that would have a much different effect on the American people.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm pretty excited because football started today.
Yes, football started today. This week on For the Entertainment, we are going to talk about our football games that are happening. And we have the Broncos at the Giants, and we have the Steelers at the Bills. So both away games this week.
Right.
And the Broncos are actually favored to beat the Giants. It's close, but we're actually favored, so I'm going to take it.
Is this the first game that you guys have been favored to win since Super Bowl 50?
It might be one of them. Yeah, well, there's only been a handful, so I'm sure this is going to be one of them for a while that we've been favored. So
and who's your starting quarterback?
I'm excited to announce that Teddy Bridgewater is going to be our starting quarterback.
So we have a change from Drew Lock.
Yeah, so we have a change from Drew Lock. I really liked Drew Lock and his potential. His attitude was second to none, but unfortunately, his talent is still developing.
Right.
Maybe it could be something that develops into a starting role at some point. But it looks like Teddy Bridgewater kind of has the edge on him because he has a lot of starting experience, and he's actually a really good quarterback, I think, in my opinion. So it's going to be really exciting to see what he does. We have Cortland Sutton back and Jerry Jeudy, and
that's exciting. Jerry Jeudy is a really good player, and he was injured for a little bit last year, was he not?
Yeah, he had some injuries, and actually Cortland Sutton had injuries last year too. So I mean, not all of the lack of offense can be blamed on Drew Lock because we did have a lot of injuries. Even our running back situation was not good. We had Philip Lindsay was injured.
Right.
Melvin Gordon was battling injuries. Just our team was just a disarray last year.
Yeah,
but
your offense in particular.
Yeah, so really excited, and we have Von Miller back this year. He was out for the whole season. Yeah,
because even though I'm not a Broncos fan by nature, I actually really love to see a Von Miller sack in every game except when they play the Steelers. So I think that'll be pretty exciting. I'm excited to see him play again this year.
So Von Miller and Bradley Chubb can finally play together. It seems like they never get to play together. One of them is always injured. So they'll be on the field together, and I'm really excited to see our defense. There's a lot of hype surrounded our defense. We're actually there's been talk about us being playoff contenders, which I'm really excited about. And if we can score, if we can score the ball,
most important thing.
Yeah, if we can get points on the board, then I think we can be okay. I think we can be a contender.
Right. I'm excited too because Steelers are actually playing at Bills. We are not the favored pick, which is kind of cool going into the first game of the season. We're not the favored pick, but the Steelers love a great upset. So I think we're going to be good tomorrow. I think we're going to play really hard, and I'm excited because we have Ben Roethlisberger, of course, back. And last year was a bit of a rough year because we went 11-0, and there was some really rough games to get us there. And people were like, "Oh, these guys are going to take the division and go into playoffs," and we just kind of crashed and burned after that. And it was actually a really unfortunate kind of second half of the season for us.
It almost seemed like you guys just ran out of gas.
Right. Well, we ended up 12-4. I think what happened is there was really a lot of things that were broken about our system, and we were able to overlook it during the first 11 games because we just got really lucky. There were some silly calls. There were some just things that happened to be in our favor. But in the second half of the season, you really saw that breakdown, and our team really got hit hard with the COVID postponements last year too, because our bye actually got put in like week 3 or something because the Ravens ended up with a crazy amount of COVID cases throughout the season, and our games kept getting delayed. So we ended up having like a lot of really close back-to-back games and really no bye to set us off because we lost our bye very early due to another team having COVID. So I'm excited to see Ben back this year. I'm hoping that he's in the best shape of his life. I'm really excited to see the debut of Najee Harris. He was our number 1 draft pick this year, which a lot of people disagreed with that, but I was actually really excited because our running back position has been lacking some diversity for the last few years, and I think that has really hurt our offense and the ability to pass the ball because we've had no run game. So teams have really known how to combat us on that. So I'm excited to see him. I'm excited, of course, to see Juju Smith-Schuster. If you're watching, so I love him. He's a great player, has a great attitude. Excited to see Chase Claypool back again, and I'm really excited to see what they can do as the number 1 and number 2 receivers. I'm hoping that really having a good running back and having more depth in our running back position, it's going to open up our receivers a little more. You're going to see more action out of Juju Smith-Schuster this year, and our defense is looking great. We just signed TJ Watt to an extension, a really, really big extension, which is pretty uncharacteristic of the Steelers team, but I love TJ Watt. I think he's great. I think he's probably going to be worth every penny. I'm so excited to have Minkah Fitzpatrick back. He was injured for a portion of the year last year, but he is awesome at turning over the ball. Was in my opinion, one of the best trades that we've ever made. And then we've got Devin Bush back, who was actually injured very early last year and was unable to play most of the season. And I'm excited about him because he was actually I believe he was our number 1 draft pick the year before, if I'm not mistaken. And he looked really explosive that first year, and then we just kind of lost him so early. So I'm hoping to see a lot of Minkah Fitzpatrick and Devin Bush turnovers because they've just both seem to do really well with that. And I love a good turnover.
I love turnovers.
So and
man.
TJ Watt stripping the ball. I'm excited to see all of that. So so as much craziness has gone on with football, we're still excited. We're excited to see our teams win tomorrow, and we're excited to see them continue to win. And I'm going to go with Broncos winning at the Giants tomorrow, and I'm gonna say you guys win 28-14.
28-14.
Yeah,
dude. If we could score over 20 points, I would be so excited because our offense has been not notorious for scoring.
At least the last couple of years.
So it's funny because the Super Bowl 50 we had, or not Super Bowl 50, but the year before that we had one of the best offenses ever, and ever since then our offense has just declined and it's dissolved into nothing. So if we could score over 20 points, that would get me so excited for this year. I would be so hyped. So my prediction for you, I would say that the Steelers are going to upset the Bills, and I think that they are going to score 21 points, and the Bills are going to score 17 points.
21-17. I think that's a really good prediction. And I think one of the things the Steelers are most noted for is I think they are really good at stepping up when they're not favored. When they're kind of the underdog going in. But I also think that they're really good at keeping games close. And it's actually one of the reasons I love watching them play football, because I feel like I've always got that knot in my stomach until right at the very end when we actually win, because you just never know what's going to happen. And so they've just kept, I've seen even, going back to the era of like Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown, which, to be clear, I don't miss their attitudes on the team, but their talent was, unquestionable. And, I just remember like at the last minute winning a game against the Ravens because Le'Veon Bell crossed the end zone, and I just remember thinking like, this is the most incredible thing I've ever seen. Like, I was so excited for it because it was just like, it was right there down to the wire, and I'm like just yelling at the TV like, come on, you can do this, So that's one of the things I really love. So I think that's actually a really good prediction. Keep the game close within a single score, and I think it's going to be a hard fought game and a well-deserved win, hopefully. All right. Well, hopefully you enjoyed this week's episode, and I hope that your team has won in their game. And be sure to tune in next week, and we'll see you then. Thanks, guys.